Throughout the history, the great thinkers, philosophers, prophets of God, they have verbalized in different ways the mechanism, in a way, of how everything was created and how are we supposed to comprehend it. And these three possibilities, let's say, is verbalized and explained thoroughly by Abdul-Baha, although this is not from Abdul-Baha himself. It's been, as I said, other philosophers and thinkers and other prophets of God have, in one way or another, explained the same possibilities. So, what we are going to speak of right now and go into some depth is really divine wisdom, is the truth. And truth has no dependency upon its origin. The origin of truth is truth itself, which is that essential essence, out of reach, unthinkable, unknowable. So Abdul-Baha goes on and says that the creation must have come into being only through three possibilities. Now we're going to look at these possibilities in some depth. However, we might, and I have a hypothesis. I want to hypothesize that actually it's not three different ways of possibilities. It's really two. We can reduce it to two from three. And this is my understanding. In the writings and talks of Abdul-Baha, he refers to three possibilities, three ways of thinking about it, about the mechanism of creation. How does creation come into existence? He says the first one is, and I'm not going to necessarily say in a specific order, I'm just going to say it however it comes out. The first one is involuntary. That means things come into being, come into existence on their own. And right away we can think of a physical example, because physical reality is part of the reality of all existence. When something happens involuntarily, it's very interesting, because all the things that have inherently certain attributes and characteristics, and this is taken involuntarily and related to them, they cannot reverse the direction of that mechanism. For example, fire is inherently burning. For fire to burn is inherent. That's part of its reality. So that's an involuntary act. Means what? Means that fire cannot by itself stop burning. Fire burns. That's an inherent quality of fire. So, for now, that's enough description. We're going to go on and we come back to these again, to each one of these. The next one, the next mechanism, the next possibility is accidental creation. That means things have been created, everything in the world of creation, accidentally. Means what? Means they're not involuntary. It's not inherently part of their character that they have to do it. They have no choice. It's accidental. That means sometimes go ahead and sometimes no go ahead. Simple as it is. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. That's called accidental. Now, this is the one that I have a problem understanding, and I think we might be able to put it under the other two categories, which we already talked about, one of them, which is the involuntary inherent quality. So just to make sure that we understand the accidental mechanism is that when things happen accidentally, you don't see any organized pattern, any order. Hence, it's accidental. It happens when he wants to. It happens in a way that he wants to. It's not obliged to follow any order or certain organizations. And the final product doesn't have to be the same as before or after, because it's accidental. Sometimes it comes out this way, sometimes it comes out very different. Hence, accidental. Now, when we look at the world around us, do things happen accidentally? Or we observe certain order, certain fundamental underlying principles that everything follows. Now, how does it happen? We have no idea. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the actual step-by-step mechanism. We're just looking at the overall movement. Overall flow has certain order. And this is how we are part of the nature as well, because we also recognize that order. And we take it as granted. We take it for granted. So, for example, just to make sure that we completely clear on that, accidental worlds, things that happen accidentally, they happen out of nowhere with no prior preparation, and they're always surprising. Now, this is a little deeper than just giving a simple example. If I want to give you an example, a simple one, I would say that, look at all the trees. Do you see one, even one, that is upside down? That means the branches are underground and the root is out in the open, above the ground? No. Things have certain order. They follow certain logical step, natural law. That's what we call. So that is definitely not an accidental event. However, things that do happen accidentally, for example, the accident itself, the word accident, we call it accidents because we cannot identify a cause or a series of causes within our ability, it's not within our capacity to identify all the causes that ended up in the event that we call accident. Because of our inability to identify every single step that ended up with that accident, we call it accident because it's a matter of incapacity. We don't have the capacity to know all of these. It's impossible. Now, is that something that could be improved? Of course. Even right now, compared to 500 years ago, even 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, we have identified things that we used to think as accident. We used to call them accidents, but they're not accidents anymore. We know exactly how they're caused, or getting closer to the actual pattern that the accident was the final product of. In future, with supercomputers or whatever, artificial intelligence, they can go through the whole chain of accidents from the chain of causes to the very origin. That means the cause that actually put all the other causes in motion in order to come up with the final product, which is an accident. And it's not going to be called accident at that time because we know what caused it. We call something an accident because we are unaware of its cause or causes. So far, we looked at involuntary, which is inherent quality, cannot be separated from the entity itself. So water is wet. You can't call something water if it's dry. It's something else. It might look like water, but it's not water because the inherent quality of water is wetness. The inherent quality of fire, as we mentioned, is to burn. There is one more left, and this is the one that Abdul-Baha calls the only one left, because involuntary or inherent qualities cannot be reversed because it is inherent. Unless, that means they cannot reverse themselves, unless there is an external agent that acts upon them and reverses or changes the direction in any way possible. Accident, we just looked at, accidental events, they're not really accidental events. They have a cause. We just haven't figured them out yet. So, the only one left here is voluntary. So, involuntary needs an agent. It cannot act upon itself. That's not possible. So when things go this way, go from left to right, and then decide to turn around and go from right to left, that can't be involuntary. That cannot be inherent, because there's only one direction, and if you want to turn around and change direction, you need to have something to change it for you, because you can't do it. Inherently, you have to go that way. You have to go from left to right. If you want to go from right to left, then that inherent quality needs to be replaced by another quality. That cannot be happened by the entity itself. So it cannot be involuntary, the world of creation, created world. Accidental, it can't be accidental because we can see a definite order in everything. Things don't happen inside out, upside down, or in a very funny way, just like an accident could happen. Does not. So these two are out. The only one that is left is voluntary. Voluntary means what? That means you have a power within yourself, a volitional power that you can will, you can decide, you can choose to do or not to do. Now, this is very, very purely spoken at. Although what we do during the day in normal life, what we think we are in charge of, or we decide for ourselves, most of the time we're being pulled and inclined or influenced by many, many other things, factors that we think we're making our own decision, but we're not. But that's besides the point. The foundation is that we have a willpower, which is called voluntary. We can voluntarily change direction. This is the only way that is left. It cannot be involuntary. It cannot be accidental. Why can it be? Because they don't make sense. It makes no rational sense whatsoever. The only one left is voluntary. Voluntarily, you introduce a change. Voluntarily, you decide to create. Voluntarily, you decide to destroy that creation, or replace it, or transform it. So that's extremely important to understand these three choices that we have. But you only have three choices. Now, if somebody can say, well, the science these days, which is true, they came up with the theory that it's things could self-organize themselves. What is self-organization? Self-organization is the same as saying they have inherent qualities to self-organize. That's it. To self-organize, it's an inherent, innate quality. It's the same as the involuntary choice that we talked about. So if they self-organize, they are unable to self-disorganize because it's an inherent quality. Just as fire cannot decide not to burn. It has no control over it. Now, what I hypothesized at the beginning is that we really have two choices. We don't have three choices. Why is that? First of all, let's quickly review. Involuntary choice is clear. It's inherent quality. Cannot be separated from the entity itself. The sun shines. If the sun stops shining, do you call it sun? It's no longer sun. The inherent quality of sun is to shine, is to give light. Voluntary is when you can introduce change voluntarily using your volition to do or not to do. Accidental really doesn't exist. It's only a stepping stone. It's only a stepping stone either to the involuntary choice or to the voluntary choice. It's in the middle and it does not really exist in itself. There is no such a thing. That's what I'm arguing now. That there is no such a thing as an accident. What happens and is identified and is labeled as accident is really lack of knowledge of the cause and effect chains that we are unaware of every single step. Because we are unable to follow or trace it back, we have no recourse but to call it an accident. Because it happened with no reason, for no reason. I cannot identify the reason. I can't identify the cause, so it's an accident. Or I cannot identify clearly the cause of this event, so I have to call this event an accident. So accident does not occupy a station for itself. It's a lack of, it's in between. It's like the gray area between the involuntary, which is inherent quality, and the voluntary, which is volitional quality, having a willpower, to be in charge, to introduce change, to initiate change. So we can go on and delve into it even deeper, but I think it's enough for now. And if we have time later on, we come back and rehash these subject matters.